Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Google Talk. Today we'll be chatting with Abigail Hing Wen. She's the author of Loveboat Taipei, which that video was just a little preview about, and also be chatting with Dani Melia, who is the producer of The Farewell. And so I'd like to welcome them on stage. All right, thank you both so much for joining us today. As far as the flow of today's conversation, from now until about 12:45 or so, we'll be going through a couple of questions, having a little bit of a discussion, and then we'll also be leaving time for the audience, of course, to also ask questions, and we'll sort of take it from there. So just to start off, I wanted to introduce both of you just so the audience has an idea of who you are, and then we can get in a little bit more to the discussion. So yeah, first of all, Abigail Hing Wen was born in West Virginia to a family of immigrants. Her mother is from the Philippines and her father from Indonesia. She grew up in Ohio and graduated from Harvard and Columbia Law School. She worked in D.C. for the Senate as a law clerk for a federal judge, and now is in Silicon Valley in venture capital and artificial intelligence. She also managed to find time to earn her MFA in writing from Vermont College of Fine Arts and has been writing for 12 years. And during that time, she's completed 5 novels, and she actually just published her first novel, Loveboat, 2 days ago, so really fresh off the press. And then Dani over here was born and raised in NYC. She studied film at NYU, and after graduating, started working at indie production company Big Beach, the team behind some films like Little Miss Sunshine, Loving, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. And 12 years later, Dani's still with the company, and she opened their LA branch up in 2015, I believe just down in Santa Monica, not too far from here. And now she oversees their film development and production. Last year, she produced the Sundance breakout hit, The Farewell, which some of us may have also heard about or watched in theaters, directed by Lulu, Wang, and starring Aquafina, which became one of the highest grossing independent films of the year. And huge shout out to Awkwafina for becoming the first Asian American to win a Golden Globe for Best Actress in Musical or Comedy. So yeah, that's our lovely people here. Just getting straight into it. Abigail, can you share a little bit more about how you paved your writing career and balance that with your full-time work?
I've been writing, as you mentioned, for 12 years. I was originally on the path to becoming a law professor. So I had done a clerkship in DC and I'd written an article for law, and I was pregnant with my second kid and thinking about writing that article. That's kind of the next step. And I couldn't bring myself to do it. I thought, I'll write this article, 5 people would read it, it would move the needle for no one coming from me. But at the same time, I had an idea for a novel in my head. And my husband was like, you're excited, why don't you just go do it? And so I did, and I loved it. And that was really surprising to me how much I loved it. And it just kind of was very natural. And that novel, I ended up sending it out in the world. It got rejected by everyone except for one agent who printed it out, marked it up by hand, mailed it back to me and said, I really think there's something here. She turned it down, but 10 years later, she is now my agent. And so it felt like I'd come full circle. So in the interim, I did write a number of other novels. It took me a while to learn the craft of writing a novel. There's some things that law taught me about the discipline of writing, but there were things I had to unlearn about, the economy of writing. I needed to become more succinct, and, creative writing is a very different beast, and so the MFA was really helpful. And I think the big choice for me in my career was, as a lawyer, I was at a firm choosing to go in-house to work in venture capital as a lawyer, and that gave me more control over my schedule. So I was able to find the headspace to do the writing on the side. And I think, that was not always, I would sometimes look back at that choice and like, did I make the right decision or not? And, it seems like I did, because I was able to do both. And now I'm still really enjoying the work that I'm doing in tech and AI, but I have this book coming out now, which has been really fun.
Thanks for sharing. Cool. And then Dani, can you tell us a little bit about how you decided to pursue the film industry and like some of the big things that helped you get to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. I'm very lucky because I interned at a wonderful company that was really small at the time while I was in film school, called Big Beach, and I'm still there, which is kind of unheard of in an industry where most people I know and came up with have probably jumped around to like 6 or 7 different places. But the company is one that I actually sent them my resume and said, you should hire me. I'll work for free, whatever. After I saw Little Miss Sunshine, and that was a film that was about family, and that I think defied like genre kind of constraints that we normally think of. Like, yes, it's a family movie, but it's got something to say, and it's sometimes a little bit edgy, and I think it really kind of like speaks to the brand of this company, which likes to tell stories about what brings people together, human connection, people from all walks of life. And I think that you can see why 12 years later, a film like The Farewell really feels like it fits into that space. And anyway, that's how I ended up getting into this world, was seeing a movie and cold calling and saying, you should hire me. And then I was lucky enough to kind of work my way from being an assistant to producers to helping oversee post-production, being on sets, kind of being a little bit of a jack of all trades, supporting the producers until I finally did get to lead produce film myself. And The Farewell was the first that I did. After hearing Lulu Wang's podcast episode called In Defense of Ignorance, What You Don't Know, it was an episode of This American Life. And it was after hearing that and reaching out to her that we said, wow, she's a filmmaker and this is such an interesting story. I think that there's a movie that we should make that really fits into the Big Beach brand.
Yeah. Thank you. And I gotta ask, since you grew up and were from New York versus LA, where do you think you are happier, or like, what do you think of the vibe between the two different areas?
It's hard to compare the two. I think that comparing New York and LA and which is better is actually the worst thing that you can do. And if you can just appreciate both cities for what they are, then you'll have a much better time in either of them. I'm born and raised in New York City, apartment living, a lot of independence at a young age, taking the subway to school. I was exposed to so much, and I really appreciate that, being able to go to the theater. But I also can't imagine raising kids in New York now that I live here in LA. And also for what I do, this is just the city to be in.
Yeah, thank you. And then Abigail, can you give us a little bit more of a preview of what Loveboat Taipei is all about and what exactly inspired you to write this story?
Loveboat is an actual program that has been around since the 1960s. Parents have been sending their kids there to learn language and culture and find a spouse. I went on the program as a presidential scholar, so the Taiwanese government would go through the list of the major scholarships, Koch Scholars, Presidential Scholars, Westinghouse. Everyone with a Chinese last name would get this trip for free. And I actually just gave a talk at Barnes & Noble 2 nights ago. They had chosen the book as one of their young adult book club picks, and my mom was there. So someone in the audience asked my mom, like, did you know that you were sending her on this program? And I actually had never asked her this myself. And she said, no, not until she read the book did she realize, like, it's not actually just a language and cultural program. It ends up being the party of your life, because you've got a bunch of kids dropped off in this foreign country. They've been studying hard their whole lives, and there's no supervision. So there's, as the book's been coming out, I've been connecting with other alumni from the program, and it's been really fun to share the stories. There's definitely some quintessential experiences, like the glamour shots and the clubbing and the snake blood sake and the beer gardens, right? And it's a really fun way, I think, for just young people to go to the city and really make it their own. And I wanted to tell the story because I think it's just such a uniquely Asian American experience, really like none other. And in certain circles, I think everyone's either gone on Loveboat or knows someone who went on Loveboat, and it was really, really fun to put together. But at the same time, I think it's a bit of a Trojan horse for me too, to talk about issues of being an immigrant and what it means to be between two cultures, what it means to navigate your parents' hopes for you and the things that you may dream of pursuing yourself. And then there's also issues around mental health and learning differences that come up throughout the book, and it was really an opportunity just to explore so many different things and weave them together as part of the story.
Yeah, great. And then Dani, you already talked a little bit about how you heard about the story of The Farewell and how you got connected, but can you elaborate a little bit more on what made you want to take on this film and the journey to get to the point where you're shooting and really going through all those steps?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had first become aware of the story on an episode of This American Life that Lulu did, but I think that her story had a long life before that, and I'll speak a little bit to that because I know that it was a long journey for her to get, the story even out to the radio show. I think she was editing her first feature in Berlin when she actually found out that her family was gathering everyone in Chongqing, where her grandmother lived, for this wedding that her cousin was having, as a reason to get everyone together and essentially say goodbye to her grandmother without her knowing. And that's when she decided this is a movie. And her first film was more of like a screwball romantic comedy. So when she first started talking to producers about it, I think that everyone had a preconceived notion of what this movie might be. And she really stuck to her guns and said, no, I'm not going to have the character have a white boyfriend. I'm not going to, have this be a big, broad romantic comedy. She knew exactly how she saw the film. And so that's why she made the This American Life episode, because she could kind of tell the story her way. And that's what attracted us as producers. I wasn't aware of it until that this was going to be a very specific, very, authentic to her experience film. And so that was when I got involved, and we sat down and talked to her, and she said, look, I'm not going to make a movie where characters all go back to Chongqing and miraculously all speak English. That doesn't make sense. And so I'm going to make this movie they're going to speak Mandarin for the amount of time they would speak Mandarin. And we were like, okay, let's do this. And we got really excited. And I think that we all realized that there's some uphill battle in terms of, this being the first film of its kind in terms of an American film that is 85% in Mandarin. So, we met all those challenges, but we kind of just approached them in a really gung-ho manner because we were so excited about the story at the core. And to me, I think that if you've got a great story, language should not be a barrier. And we had a great story that clearly is really specific, but that specificity has been resonating with people widely. And I think it's largely due to the fact that Lulu really stuck to her, her guns with that.
And I love that because I think it broadens what it means to be American, right?
Absolutely. It's really interesting because, with some stuff that's just been going on and some of the rhetoric right now in our country, I've talked to Lulu a lot about that, sort of like, wow, we set out to just tell your story, your really authentic, specific story, and is it a political statement? She's American. She's as American as her brother who, was born 10 years after her and born in the United States in Florida, and she was born in Beijing, but they're both American. So that's been really, really interesting. And, we've had a lot of conversations as we are entering the awards circuit because the film is being labeled differently in different awards. So we were nominated this past weekend for the Golden Globe for Best Foreign Language Film. We were not eligible to be the Best Comedy or Musical, even though Aquafina was nominated as an actress in a comedy or musical. But because the film was 50% not in English, they decided to put us in the foreign language category. So what I've come to learn is that when you do something that isn't easily categorized, it's great, it's important, and you need to do it because that's how we progress and that's how change happens. But it's also sometimes tricky to be in that change because no one knows quite how to handle you.
Right. And I think what really strikes me what you're saying is it's really just a reflection of her reality, right? And I found the same thing with Loveboat Taipei. There's also mixed English and Chinese on the page. And that's just how I grew up. I grew up listening to Mandarin and Hokkien around me, and I couldn't actually understand it, but it's just part of the dialogue, and I can get the gist of things. And I didn't actually notice it until Phil Yu pointed it out in a podcast interview with him. And he's like, that's so cool that the pinyin is just dropped in there and it's not even translated, right? I'm like, but that's just life, right? And that's also who we are.
I love that. Yeah, it's just really authentic. It's not even it's just reality for you as the author, and for Lulu as the screenwriter and director. That's just life, and so you're just depicting honest reality.
And I think having you to support that is really important. So Harper being really cool with just having the random pinyin there with the tones, and that's all really important in supporting the Asian American art and others.
Yeah.
I know I was definitely excited when I was able to watch the farewell screening and just being able to relate with different things that maybe I haven't seen on screen before. And same thing with Loveboat, just even within the first few pages, just knowing that, hey, this is someone that maybe I could more easily identify with than other novels. But I do have to ask, what do you both think were the biggest challenges in terms of like bringing these diverse, authentic stories that maybe have not been told before in these traditional media sources? What were some of those challenges or just big takeaways for you two?
Well, just the challenge of making a film that's a U.S.-Chinese co-production alone was, it was just quite a feat for a small American indie company to go to shoot a film in another country where the film infrastructure is slightly different and the language and cultural barriers. But I think that's also what helped make the movie so great, is that, like, we had a really, really international crew and cast who could kind of, we weren't sort of going to Hong Kong and pretending we were in Northeast China. We shot in Northeast China. So that was a challenge, but also part of what makes it authentic. And then, I think the challenge of bringing a film that is difficult to categorize to the main stage is that the people who are actually responsible for bringing the film out to the world. So what my company does is we produce and finance, but then we bring to marketplace like Sundance and we sell to a distributor. And so to have the distributors think about how they can market the film and bring it to an audience when they've never seen a film like this before, that was definitely the challenge. And we ended up partnering with A24, and they're, and the indie distributor behind the Academy Award-winning Moonlight. And so they've dealt with film, they've handled films really well that are about specific experiences. And so they handle this one really well, but they're completely independent, which allows them to really handle it the way that they want to, whereas some bigger companies have output deals with, like a pay TV deal or an output deal of some sort that doesn't allow them to release a film that's over a certain percent subtitled. So I think that the language and the subtitles, people thought that was going to be a huge barrier for this being a commercial release, and it really wasn't. I think that when you're swept up into a story, you're so swept up that you sometimes just forget that you're reading subtitles, and I hope that's what happens with The Farewell. I've heard that from some audience members, but that was a big challenge, was just people, who've followed very traditional release models, not quite knowing how to handle something that didn't fit into a category that they already were familiar with.
I would say there's both internal and external obstacles. So I think internally, I grew up an avid reader. I love to read. I just never thought that I could be an author. I didn't have models before me that I related to. And it wasn't until I did my MFA program at Vermont College of Fine Arts where, I think the faculty really set me straight. Like, no, you should go ahead and write a story where an Asian American girl is the main character, and let's do that. And there was also external reasons. So there were stories in the industry about a girl 15 years ago who was asked to change her Asian American boy main character to a white boy before she could be published. And, so that story was kind of in the industry. And so I think that discouraged people, like, well, I don't want to put in all this work if I can't actually see it through. And then thinking that it was so long ago, it actually turns out this is still going on today. Like, so 2 years ago, someone did a film contract where the film contract itself actually said, and like, we have the option to change your Asian female character to a Caucasian female character. So I think those are the places where we're not there yet. I think there's a lot of people who are very forward thinking, but and they need to keep talking about like why diverse stories matter and why we need to have many voices, and hopefully bring along the rest of the people.
Definitely. Thanks for sharing. And sort of going straight into that, as we look into 2020 and beyond, what is your hope for the storytelling of whether it be Asian American stories or other authentic stories that maybe haven't been told yet in the entertainment and media industries? Like, what would that look like? And is there anything even our audience can do here today to help support some of those efforts?
Well, yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think that it's really supporting people behind, whether it's authors or directors, but the people who are creating, telling their stories and not having to whitewash their stories. And it's really also like, look, I'm not an Asian American woman, and I produced a film that is, about an experience that I don't know. I was lucky enough to get to go scout and meet the director's whole family and get to kind of understand a little bit of what the character might have gone through. But I think it's really important for us, you might call us the gatekeepers as producers and financiers, to listen to creators. And the same with, I'm sure, your editors and publishers and everything. Like, it's not my story. I can actually listen, and then I can help bring someone else's story to life and give them the resources they need and the support that they need. And I think that's really important for us to do. And I think that it's not just a responsibility, but it's also a really commercially viable thing to do, because these movies have wide audiences. People are really hungry to see their experience on screen or read about their experience in a book, and find characters that they can relate to. And that's whether it's Asian American or a different identity. And it's not just ethnicity, but it's also class stories. But I think that inclusive stories, people are really hungry for them. And I also think that I would tell anyone who wants to tell a story not to try to emulate something that they've seen before, but to tell their own story. I think that Hollywood has a bit of a problem where everyone's trying to chase a trend, and people might say, oh, what's the next farewell? And I'm not interested in finding the next farewell. I'm interested in finding a filmmaker who has a strong point of view and a story that's really intriguing, that needs to be told and will resonate with audiences. Because when we set out to make The Farewell, it didn't make sense on paper, and we never would have made it if we did something that made sense on paper.
I would love us to get to a place where we don't have to have these conversations anymore, and that diversity is just the norm. I think you're exactly right. Like, there's definitely a commercial market for it. I'm definitely feeling, as this book comes out, there's so much hunger for stories from the Asian American community and from other communities. I think this book has a cast of over 30 diverse Asian American characters, and my hope is that we'll see them on a screen, and that those actors will go on to be discovered into non-ethnic specific roles, because Asian Americans do play many roles in society, and not just the limited ones that we've seen so far in the news and the media.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And just thinking back about previous projects or even current things that you might be working on, is there something that has been like a standout project that you have worked on previously or are in the process of working on? And would you be open to sharing with the audience, giving us a preview?
So this book is a standalone, but I do have a companion novel that I'm working on that follows the lives of two of the characters, and probably more. I'm still working on it, so it's still all in my head and a muddle, but I'm excited about that one.
Is it better to tell us a film we've already made or something that's in development?
Maybe in development.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sure. I'm really excited about a project we just announced a few weeks ago that's called Winner, and it's about Reality Winner. And she's actually currently in prison. She's a real person. She was a whistleblower, and she was the first person to reveal to the American public that Russia had meddled in the 2016 election. And she's in prison for espionage, even though she was sort of trying to wave her arms and say, hey guys, this is maybe kind of a crazy, messed up situation. And we attached an amazing director named Susanna Fogel to direct. She did a film called The Spy Who Dumped Me, and I'm just really excited as we're in the process of gearing up for production on that one, to hopefully shoot that this year.
Yeah, cool. Looking forward to both of those projects. All right, audience, we have maybe one or two more questions, and then I'll leave it to you all if you have questions as well, so you can start thinking about those. But yeah, another question for both of you, even though you've been working in the creative space, like what exactly do you do to like get those creative juices flowing? And whenever you get stuck, is there any type of ritual or process that you do to kind of get unstuck, I guess?
So I think because I have such a crazy schedule with I have 2 kids, and then I work, and then I've got the writing, I can't afford to get stuck. And so the good thing is, like, what I do
Time is precious.
Time is very precious. Like, so I think that actually is good because it forces me to write. Like, whenever I have those moments, I have an hour. I shared last night at a launch party that I used to, I bring my laptop with me everywhere and my phone. And so if I'm sitting in the car waiting to pick up a kid from somewhere and I've got 20 minutes, I'll pull out my laptop and just do some writing there. I don't write in order, but I write to like what the emotional points are, and I often will take notes on my phone, and I'll go back later to each of those notes, and they're a trigger for me to flesh out a full scene or a full dialogue between characters. And then when I'm in the right headset or I have more space, then I'll like string it all together. And so then I guess maybe the answer to your question, where does the inspiration come from? It just comes from everywhere all the time, and I just collect it and put it together again later, if that makes sense.
Sounds like we need to create an app for that to help you organize, help authors organize their floating thoughts.
That would be fun.
How about you, Dani?
I think it's a little different for me as a producer, but I think that one thing that I think I love to do with directors is any sort of like scouting or activities related to the project that we're doing, even if it's not written yet. So for example, we're doing a project with Lulu, Wang, who directed The Farewell. We're doing her next film that is based on a short story, and it has a big virtual reality component. And so a few weeks ago, we went up to San Luis Obispo, and we actually went to visit this place that develops haptic technology, and we got to put on headsets and gloves and like play with VR and play in the VR world and kind of do something that's a little bit like what some of the characters are going to do in her film. And even though she's still writing it, I think that creative people who are working on a project together, doing anything that is physically removing them from their daily lives to get together and do something related to the movie or the project they're creating, that is a great way to bond, get to know each other, and get to really think in a fun way about the story that you're telling.
I like that. And I think that applies to like probably any team that works together to get them to know each other a little bit better and make it a positive experience. It's cool. Cool. And then for both of you, if you weren't doing the job or jobs in Abigail's case that you're doing right now, what would you be doing instead? And the sky's the limit for this question. You don't have to think about like money or anything like that.
So I really love the blend of what I'm doing right now. I think my only problem is it's just too much of it. So my ideal world is if I can find a way to integrate all of it. Like I love the artificial intelligence. I have a novel actually on AI and virtual reality that I've been working on for a while, and I just figured out how to make it work recently. But you know, I have an integrated life in the story world with my interests in tech and AI and story. But I would love to actually find a way to integrate it on the technical side with AI and storytelling. So I think that's something I've just begun to think about and started to have conversations around that.
You know, that's such a great question. And I would love to do something completely different than I'm doing, like something that entails me being outdoors all the time and hands-on, tangible. So I don't know if it would be, I think in 2019, someone I really look up to is Greta Thunberg, and I think I'd love to do something environmental. I don't know exactly what that would be or what it would look like, but I'd like to do something to have a positive impact on the environment. I don't know what.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Very cool. Both of your ideas. Great. Well, thanks for chatting with me up to this point. I'm now going to open it up to the audience. We have Bowie over here that can help throw the mic around. So if you have questions, feel free to grab the mic or raise your hand. I think we have one right here.
Should I just talk to it? Yep. Great. Thank you for sharing your very inspiring stories. So I think in recent years we noticed that there are a lot of attention on Asian Americans who are most times I think are Asians who grew up in America. I wonder if there's any attention or is any or like potential attentions in the industry on the immigrants, Asian immigrants immigrated to America either with family or without families, or immigrate to San Gabriel Valley or somewhere like Midwest or somewhere totally different. Because I feel there are a lot of similarities between those two groups, but at the same time quite different as well.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why we need more diverse stories. Like, there's so many stories out there. I just did a panel with Yangsha Chu, who's the author of The Ghost Bride. She has a Netflix series coming out later this month. And she's a first-generation Chinese-American immigrant. And Stacy Lee, who's a fourth-generation Chinese-American immigrant, and I'm a second-generation. And we just, and at the point of the panel that I pulled it together because I'm like, the point is that we are all similar, but we're all really different, and all these stories need to be told. So I agree, like there should be more of those as well.
I absolutely agree. I think that there's a plethora of stories, and it's wonderful that we're seeing films and books like ours that are from an Asian American perspective. But there's so much room for many, many, many perspectives, including people who immigrate to this country and what that experience must be like.
Hello, thank you for talking to us. I was wondering, for both of your respective stories that you created, was there something that surprised you unexpectedly about your story specifically? Like, Dani, you were learning about a new culture, Mandarin. Was there something specific that they did that they do every day in their lives that they wouldn't have expected you to be surprised by? And Abigail, same. Was there because you present your book to an American audience, was there something that you wrote and you just kind of brushed by, but someone said, "Oh, I never knew that. That's surprising to me"?
Well, the entire premise of The Farewell, the idea that you might hide a diagnosis from a family member in order to carry the burden for them, which I think is a really beautiful idea, was really surprising to a lot of American audience members. But then when we went to China early on, and we structured this as a co-production, so we met in Beijing with a lot of different companies who could potentially invest in the story, and a lot of in the film, and a lot of the response was, well, what's so crazy about that? We did that in my family. What is so special about the story? So it was really interesting to see that on both the American and the Chinese side, finding that on the Chinese side, thinking this is just sort of like mundane or commonplace. Is it really that special or significant enough to make a film around this concept? And then here, people saying, would you really lie to your grandparent? And so that was just fascinating. Yeah.
I think I actually have a similar experience. I think I've been surprised at how many people relate to the story. It's very specific to the Asian American community, but my editor is Italian American. She's like, our family's just like this, and the idea of having a family that's high expectations and the kids carrying that burden, that's actually not just Asian American. There's so many other ethnicities in the United States and elsewhere that really relate to that. And then even the characters and the friendships between the characters and the romances, all that is, I think, what's exciting for me is just the hope was to make Asian Americans just, this is who we are. We're human. We make mistakes and we recover from them and we fall in love, and realizing wow, people are really resonating with that even outside the Asian American community. So that's been really cool.
And sorry, I'm going to keep going. And I feel like that might be one of the reasons why we hesitate to write these stories, because we think it's so specific to us and we think it's just more normal and mundane and it wouldn't be interesting. But as soon as we get it out there and someone sees it, I feel like they'd realize that, yeah, we need these stories.
Right. So write those stories.
Yes, please do. One thing that that Lulu has said a few times that really stuck with me is all of these stories are these aren't big superhero movies. They're not filled with action. They're the day-to-day lives of individuals, but the little small things that happen in our lives, the death of a grandparent, a wedding, these interpersonal relationships are monumental to the individuals. And so you can make a story that's just as effective, that's a small character-driven story, as a big story, if you really kind of treat what goes on emotionally in those stories as really important and impactful. And that's, I think, why audiences are resonating, with the film and the book.
Looks like we have another question over here.
Hi, thank you for presenting again. And my question is more kind of logistical. Which technologies do you use regularly that you don't think you could do without? And if you could have a new technology that would do anything, what would it be?
So I have thought about this a bit. I use Scrivener to write. It's a really great program I recommend it to everyone who's writing, because it allows you to create folders and also individual documents that are really well laid out on the left-hand margin, and I can see all my scenes that way. So I'm able to just basically throw all my random ideas into the scenes, and I can reorder them. I guess it works with my process that I talked about earlier. So I swear by that. And as far as new technologies, I've been thinking about this just because I'm thinking about how do you bring the AI and the storytelling together. I've seen some really cool applications now where people are able to transfer styles and moods and colors and tones of images onto each other. And hey, it'd be so fun if I could just take my novel and suddenly turn it steampunk, or like the fantasy version or the boy version, whatever it is. And that would be cool. That would save me a lot of time too.
So I do a lot of reading screenplays, like constantly, and I tend to read in an app called Goodreader, and it's wonderful, and jot my notes down and everything. But and that's great for when I'm reading. But when I'm in the car, which is a lot because I live in Venice and have to go to Hollywood all the time, I wish there was a better program to read scripts in that would read to me with real sounding voices. I really do. And I mean, that would just save me so much time, because I end up just listening to podcasts in the car, because if you try to actually use like the software, it just sounds like a robot reading to you, like interior. And yeah, it's just not doable.
Awesome, thank you.
Who are some people in your respective industries that you look up to?
Great question.
First of all, I really look up to all of the female directors who I've been working with this year. This year we made 2 films with female directors. We made A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood that Marielle Heller directed, and we made The Farewell that Lulu Wang directed. And even people I didn't work with but who made great films this year, Greta Gerwig, Alma Harrell, the list goes on, Lorene Scafaria. I think there are amazing female directors who are making amazing work, and with some of the nominations recently, they haven't been recognized, and I think that I look up to them because they are creating, films that we haven't seen before, and they're really like breaking the glass ceiling, and I just hope to be able to keep supporting them.
Yeah, I think I really admire the people who've come before on this path, and are opening the doors for more stories. So, Crazy Rich Asians, The Farewell, authors like Maureen Gu, Jenny Han, Stacey Lee, Sabah Tahir, like they've all been writing and pushing in a time when it was harder 6 years ago even, and it's so much easier now, but we still have a ways to go, and I'm grateful for all the work that they've done in paving this path.
For both of you as respective producer and author in your journey, are there any particular hard-learned lessons or critiques that you've come to really value along the journey? And on the flip side, could you tell us a moment that has been the most rewarding and poignant in your career?
I think how hard it is to create art, and it's very difficult to make a living in art in general, but really the key for me has been just keep going. Like I wrote 12 years is a really long time. Like I did not want to tell anyone that I was writing for so long, and my friends would be like, how's the book going? And I'm like, yeah, it's going, right? And just rejection after rejection. But some of the things that keep me going is like Michael Jordan talks about how he makes so many baskets because he shot so many, and Tiger Woods says something similar. Thomas Edison has over 1,000 patents, but we only know him for 2 or 3 today. And I think that's part of what it takes. Like you just got to keep taking risks and putting yourself out there and trying to see what works and what doesn't, and learn quickly and fail fast. And all those things that apply in the technical world, I think they apply really well in the art world, but it sometimes can be really painful and heartbreaking.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. It isn't, the success when it happens looks like it happens overnight, and it doesn't happen overnight. And you have to really persevere, and projects take a really long time to get made. I've been at a company for 12 years, and some of the film A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, I think was in development for 6. And it just doesn't happen that quickly, and you have to keep at it, and you have to have tenacity. And yeah, I think that honestly, I'm still kind of on cloud 9 from Sunday when Aquafina won, and I think that's probably the highlight. I mean, like, that she came and made this teeny tiny movie with us, in a tier 3 city in China was huge in and of itself. And then for her to do her first dramatic role in another language and to really get the accolades she deserves is so rewarding. And she worked so hard and she did such a beautiful job. And then, you know, to find out that she was the first Asian American woman nominated or to win in that category, you know, and that like not only did she get this opportunity and did she crush it, she also like broke a boundary. That was just great too. So that was probably one of the most rewarding moments in my career.
Thank you.
Hello. My question is for Abigail. How did you find the discipline to write a whole book when you had like a job, kids, and were there any moments where you're like, you know what, I don't need to be an artist. It's like okay to be a very successful person and also have a family?
Yeah, so I actually heard a writer once say, like, I give you permission to stop writing. Like, not to me, but just to people in general. And I think for me, I'm a writer. I'm fundamentally a writer. I've always written. I've always told stories to my brother and sister when we were little. I've been journaling since I was 9. And I can't really settle until I've written. So I think that's really why I kept going. And I love it. I love the balance, actually, that it gave me with my work where, you know, I loved working with the startup companies and seeing all the new technologies come through. But then the writing, I think, just gives me another world to explore. And then I love the language and just trying to find ways to put these ideas and images in my head onto the page. And so, you know, I think I'm going to write till I die because it's just part of who I am.
That's beautiful.
So I was curious if either of you had any recommendations or suggestions to the people who are creating or bringing stories out there who feel like they do need to compromise. They need to introduce the white boyfriend or something like that. They need to make the story more palatable to a wider audience. Do you have any words of encouragement or suggestions to them that, as far as keeping to what they can bring to the table?
Don't do it.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think that find the collaborators who support your vision. Don't listen to the people who don't. The people who are telling you you need to make a sacrifice for this to be palatable to an audience, they don't understand your story. So find the people who understand your story, and that's who you should be working with.
And I think we're getting there. So I completely agree. Stick to your guns.
All right, maybe time for one more question. I can ask my own if others don't have a questions. Yeah, I guess, do either of you have any top favorites when it comes to books or movies that you could share with the audience?
So my husband is not a big reader of fiction. So when he asked us for recommendations, we gave him 2. One is American Born Chinese by Jean Yang. For me, that was the book that was like, that's my story. And it was really important for me when at the time I was reading it. And my second is The Road by Cormac McCarthy, which is completely the opposite of Loveboat Taipei. It's like this dystopian, burned out world, a father and a son, like, you know, dealing with cannibals and all kinds of crazy stuff. But it's incredibly well written, gorgeous, and so spare and just really brilliant in its simplicity.
I'll suggest 2 films that I'm sure maybe some people have already seen, and they're certainly being talked about alongside The Farewell right now. But there were 2 of my favorites of the year were Parasite. It's just, yeah, I thought it was fantastic and thrilling. And if you can manage to, if you haven't already seen it, go in without reading anything about it ahead of time. That's the best way to experience that film. And then another film that I adored this year was a French film called Portrait of a Lady on Fire that was directed by Céline Sciamma. And I think that it is a really, it's a beautiful film, and it has a very specific point of view and look at art from a female perspective.
Thanks. We'll have to check those out. Any other questions from the audience? All right. Well, before we close out, is there a best way to continuing to learn more about both of you, websites or social handles, anything?
Yes. Big Beach, where I work, is bigbeach.com, and you can keep up with me on Twitter and Instagram. My handle is DTEAM, DETEEM.
And my website is abigailhingwen.com. My book just came out 2 days ago. 2 days ago. So launch week and these early weeks are really critical. So any I think support, especially for hardcover, is really important. You could follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Abigail Hing Wen.
Great. Well, let's give a round of applause for our two guests today. Thank you so much.